From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi, and welcome to Space Brains, the show where we joy watch sci-fi movies and then talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey, and this is Mark.
Hiya, it's episode 88. No, whoops, we're going forwards in time. It's 89. We did have a little bit of a mix-up with numbers there.
We've been trapped in a parallel universe.
Which is very relevant for the film we are talking about on this episode 89. It's the British sci-fi film Infinitum, I think.
Infinitum?
Infinitum, subject unknown. Maybe director Matthew Butler-Hart can correct me on that. In this episode, we'll reveal what we thought about the film, the ins and outs of narrative and film language, plus a deep dive into a specific piece of science that the filmmakers are proposing. This was written by Matthew Butler-Hart and Tori Butler-Hart, and Matthew did the directing.
And Tori did the acting.
She did.
So this is a spoiler warning. You probably had a couple of extra weeks to prepare for this one, but if you haven't seen this film, it is available through Amazon. Mm-hmm. You can rent it or download it, or just, I don't know, if you're Amazon Prime, got it?
You got it.
Watch it, come back and listen to what we have to say about it, because we're going to go through everything and it will be spoiled.
We're going to go through every single parallel universe that this film proposes, because this film is a bit of an experimental film shot with just that one crew member. So
on
Matthew,
an iPhone.
On an iPhone, shot this film. I'm pretty sure Tori is his wife, for the fact that they both got the last sort of names, I presume, but you correct me if I'm wrong. And also I think their daughter's in it as well. So it is a bit of an experimental sci-fi film where they grabbed out the mobile phone during that lockdown period and made a feature film. It's a great one to learn and look at if you're wanting to be a filmmaker or a scriptwriter, because you can see what can actually be made when you have a camera and a filmmaker and an actor. And that's all it takes sometimes. This film is basically about a Jane, who's played by Tori, is trapped in a parallel universe and is forced to find a way to alter her reality before it is too late. What was your number one takeaway from this film, Surrey?
My number one takeaway from this film is that it's nice to think of the main character that you're following as being the hero of a story, but, and this is a spoiler of this film, it's a nasty twist to give when you find out that the person we're following is actually the one that loses everything all the time. I found that this film turned rapidly into a horror for me when the full realization of what was revealed at the end there sunk in, particularly when you could see that Jane, or that version of Jane, realized what had happened.
Yeah, I felt this film, I mean, it's shown almost as a nightmare. And to me, when you get to that ending, it is a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare, this film, when you think about it and what they are suggesting for poor Jane, the Jane in this story. Yeah, the film is done as a loop, so very similar to something like Groundhog's Day, where, you know, the character is repeating itself, or Memento, the Christopher Nolan film, where, you know, we're on this kind of repetitive loop a little bit. So the narrative is looping around itself because that is symbolically showing what is happening to Jane. But then when you get that punch in the face at the end of the film of what this type of Jane's reality is, it is an absolute nightmare.
She's the one that doesn't get out of the loop.
No, she never gets out of the loop.
Which is that's kind of the horror presented. We're talking Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
It's at that point where Bill Murray's character sort of starts contemplating that this is everything.
Yeah.
This day is all I'm ever going to have, and I can't die because he tries it.
He does try it. Spoiler.
It's just he's just going to have to live that day forever. And in fact, in that movie, it's when he comes to that realization, and he goes, "Well, I guess I'll make the best of it."
Yeah.
And he starts becoming
Then things get better.
He tries to become a better person.
Yeah.
Supposedly, although there's some problematic ideas presented, but nonetheless, you get the idea.
Yeah.
And then he does break out of it.
Yeah.
In this one here, it's
She's not getting out.
that same thing. Was like, how on earth can she get out? You know, she's trapped in this loop, and we've seen this loop so many times in other films where the whole point is them breaking that loop. Like they've got to learn something or discover something which gets them out. And this one, she discovers that no, she's the one that doesn't get out.
Poor Jane.
And that there was just kind of like, that's really unpleasant.
It is.
So I guess you sort of answered a little bit though, where there's a hope, warning, or experiment. You're saying, I'm going to guess you reckon this is hope.
Yeah, no hope in this, really. I suppose unless you're not this version of Jane, you know, so...
If you're the version sitting in the comfy chair reading the book, that'd be okay.
Yeah, and we do see, you know, when she opens those doors, there's Jane doing ballet. She seems pretty happy, I think. Doing like a ballet dance performance or something. She seems to be enjoying herself. I think warning, because the film does set up early that scientists are experimenting with this. They've created a portal or a loop research experiment. And realistically, if you think about the whole point is this Jane is the Jane that is the worst case scenario, and this poor version of Jane just lives that over and over and over and really can never get out of it, to me is a warning.
I suppose it is. It's warning that you...
And I go back, I guess I just want to say, I go back to, we're here, we're talking about all the science fiction films. You know, you think about all those sci-fi films where scientists do something and then that causes the drama of the film or the story, that causes the plot to ignite.
Our own efforts have caused the problems,
So, you know, the traditional zombie, you know, that story of, not the traditional zombie story, but that zombie story that some have picked up, like The Walking Dead did, where scientists accidentally unleashed the virus. So that's a warning. So it's the same here. Scientists have created this parallel universe experiment and there's no way out for this Jane. So to me, it's a warning that could happen to any of us.
Yeah, I think you need to watch this film. If you're a scientist thinking of producing this kind of experiment, you might consider that, there could be unintended consequences.
Was this the first time you watched it?
Yeah, it was. It was the first time.
I mean, it's a new film.
It's not surprising. Didn't have much opportunity to watch it otherwise, and I got Amazon Prime during the lockdowns because being able to order things for Christmas to my parents because they couldn't come visit, that was kind of handy. And so, I watched it. I watched it on my own in my room with my headphones on.
Oh, very teenage you. Yes,
very teenage me. Because what was my wife doing? She's doing something more useful, I think, as they want to do. Probably something to do with our house that we're trying to build. But
and you said it sort of turned into a bit of a horror for you. Was that your first sort of impression? Or
well, my first impression
what
was...
happened after you saw it?
My first impression was that it was a mystery, you know, and I was hoping, or I was thinking we were going to get this unraveling mystery as to why she was there and how she got there and how, in fact, she got herself into this situation. Like I was thinking we'd be introduced to that. And then as it went along and we sort of got that situation where she sees the woman that keeps getting hit by the car. Yeah. Which I'm wondering, does she have a better or a worse, universe?
Yeah, I know. It's
because she seemed to die for some reason and she was living in fear the whole time. But anyway, it started to turn and get a little bit more sinister as it went on until that revelation at the end, I think. And how about you? Did you find any scene that was really stood out to you?
There's a few, definitely lots of really good things in this film from a filmmaker point of view, I think. And especially knowing that they did just shoot it, one filmmaker. I sort of, unfortunately, did know that information going in to watch it. I think you might have actually told me. But it did make me go, oh, wow, they've done that. And okay, that's why they've probably done that. And, they're really achieved some really cool stuff in this. I liked how Matthew decided to show some of the loops. So that first version of the loop, which I think is sort of basically the inciting incident, so we'll come back to it, but it's like the never-ending stairs, so she just gets out of the attic or whatever, and then she starts coming down the steps. And just the way that was shot, that we had there was a shot of her feet going down a couple of steps, and then kind of the camera descending steps, and then back to her feet, and then her face. But he kind of just put that on an actual loop. And then she was becoming more and more distressed because it's the never-ending stairs. And again, as an audience, you're kind of like, oh, this is a bit of a nightmare, because as an audience, we're so used to the next shot, the next shot, the next shot. We're being trained to look at the next shot.
When I was watching it, I actually thought they were going down a very long set of stairs. I thought, oh, this is a bit mysterious. There's like a particularly long, a longer flight of stairs than you'd expect from just descending one floor.
Well, I kind of picked up, I think, pretty quick what was going on, and I suppose I literally was getting frustrated, and I thought about that, and he does it a couple of times in this film. I think it's also when she drives the car out in the countryside. She gets to a road, and it kind of like you don't even really see the car do a circle. It's just she keeps coming up to the same intersection. And he does that 4 or 5 or 6 times, and I think he really pushed it. And I believe, and it'd be great if we could chat to Matthew about this, but I sort of think he was trying to upset me, the audience. Like, I think he was actually... In other films like this, they might do something like that, but then they show you another shot. So it's like it's more interesting for the audience. They might show us, anything inside the car or the wheel or her steering or even her facial expression from a different angle. But he chose to kind of show us that repetition to a point where it's almost like, I want to see something else. We're the swiping generation now. It's a 2-second, chance on social media to grab someone's attention. So for a filmmaker to put in like her feet coming down the steps and then her feet coming down the steps, and you go, okay, well, I get it. It's a never-ending step. But to show it again and again, you're either an audience member that maybe that might make you stop the film, right? And that's a very bold move by Matthew, because I think an audience could be like, oh, nah, this is too frustrating. I'm stopping this. But obviously it's something that he wanted to push his audience to. And I appreciated it, because I was feeling myself get frustrated. And I thought, well, that's what Jane would be like. That's what Jane would be feeling. She would be frustrated. Can you imagine going down a never-ending staircase?
Yeah.
When you're only one flight up, and, especially... it should be like 10 steps and you're on the bottom floor, and... You just keep descending the same set of stairs.
I think especially when she takes her gag off and leaves it there, and then she walks down and finds the gag there. But not only that, it's still around her neck. And that's like, well, I can't, that doesn't even compute. No. How does that work? So that was, I did quite like that. I liked a couple of these flashes that were done, which right at the very start, she's struggling on the chair, bound and gagged. But then there was a quick brief shot of her struggling on the chair as if she was bound and gagged, but there was no ropes on her hands and no gag on her. But then it quickly went back again. Like, you'd blink and you'd miss it.
Yes.
But I saw that and I thought that was right at the very start, which immediately sets that scene of, the issue here is not that she's bound and gagged. Yeah. Like that, to me, that's what it sort of said, was there's something else at play here, which is the actual struggle or the drama or the difficulty here is not being tied up. Yeah. Because, well, here's a shot and she's not tied up. So you go, well, how does that even work?
Yeah. And another cool thing, I think, from a filmmaker point of view as well, is that, hey, it's COVID, it's lockdown, London is sort of deserted, like wherever you were maybe in the world. I mean, even Perth became really quiet, even though Perth is generally quiet. But, like we've seen those classic scenes, and I think of, and I said the zombie film before, 28 Days, is it Cillian Murphy? He kind of comes out of the hospital in London, and there is those giant scenes of London empty, which is bizarre. And that took those filmmakers, a shit ton of money and a lot of organisation.
Oh, they had to get a lot of coordination.
I know there's another film, Vanilla Sky, with Tom Cruise, and again, he's in New York, and there's moments in that film where he's in New York and there's nothing on the streets again. And they took over New York streets 5 a.m. on Sunday mornings for 1 hour over the course of a month to get that, minute in the film of Tom Cruise walking down whatever street in Manhattan. And I thought, this is really clever that they've grabbed some moments in London and just shot it really quickly, and it's empty, and there's suburban streets empty and there's city streets empty, and it shows as filmmakers sometimes you just go take an opportunity, right? Like take an opportunity, grab a shot, and and then the next moment there might have been someone walking down the street,
Yeah,
but just because it was locked down, there was not enough people around. They didn't
I
need
noticed
the
there
budget
was
to
a
shut down
few
streets.
select camera angles as well, which were kind of upward facing or panning quickly, like almost as if you could imagine there was somebody walking along the street, and so he just filmed just in front of them and then panned faster than they were walking.
Yeah.
So it looked like it was an empty street, even though in fact there's probably maybe only 100 meters empty in front of that person.
That's right. But it doesn't matter. It shows you
it
that
looked as empty as empty.
Yeah. So I really liked a couple of things like that, and from a sci-fi point, that loop, demonstrating the loop, which we learn more about as the film goes on. Why is this a science fiction film, Surrey?
Well, I mean, it answers. It asks questions. Like it's asked this question here about the multiple world interpretation of quantum physics and the what that implication would be if we could manipulate that at a macro personal scale.
Yeah,
because it's quite an abstract concept. This idea that there's a lot of different copies of us spread across multiple worlds or whatever.
Yeah.
But what does that look like? What might that mean? What if we could interact with that, and how would that affect individual people? I thought that was very interesting, and it's not a question there. You can't use some other scenario as a surrogate for that. You couldn't set it up as it's not the effect of imperialism as demonstrated by quantum physics. Like that doesn't make any sense. That would be an interesting film, wouldn't it? Quantum physics imperialism, which is kind of what they're doing here. But the point is that you can't have a different genre here. You have to have the science fiction as its genre, because you can't tell this story or inquire about this opportunity or this situation in any other way without taking a science element, a theory or an idea or some postulation, and then pushing it to this extreme point and seeing how it plays out. Yeah. And that's sort of what these science fiction films are about, is they often or almost always have some sort of a exploration of an idea, which is then you've got to push it on to some sort of something big and something obvious to make it a story worth watching, basically, is what it comes down to. It'd be easy to sort of have a story where there were aliens, but it's just a person, they see a brief flash of light in the sky, which could have been anything, but I don't know, like that's not, there's no story there. That's just a person going, oh, I wonder what that was.
Yeah.
I guess it was unidentified. No, you've got to have Closing Hands of the Third Kind, where people are being abducted and there's strange lights and someone's getting visions, and then they culminate on a mountain with a huge flashing alien, spaceship. That you need that.
Yes, you do. And I mean, this film clearly uses a science element and then takes it to that fictional extreme, which we've seen in so many of the films we've looked at. So it is science taken to because right now scientists can't, I hope, develop parallel universes as an experiment like these guys.
Well, we can't observe them.
We can't observe them, but then even experiment on characters and if they could see the multiples in one and what they could do about that, right? Because that's kind of what Jane does.
Yeah, they're sort of...
Like Jane starts to control her reality because she has access to all the parallel... It's like that's also what this film is talking about, is like, could you actually access all of the variables at once?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea because... And that actually mentions a couple of different science ideas with the cosmology of quantum physics. Is how do we observe things? What gives us consciousness, for example? Yeah. And is consciousness
very deep?
Some sort of emergent property of multiple worlds in a quantum superposition? Such that we're only observing through our own choice, if you like, one aspect of a manifold situation.
Yeah, right.
So would it be possible to actually just choose to observe other aspects?
Yeah, like a TV show. Like
Yeah,
a TV,
I mean-
sorry, like a TV where we can
Well,
change the
I was
channels.
reading, there's one guy who was talking about this idea. Well, if I were to say, what's going to happen if I stand up and go over and turn the doorknob on the door? And then you listen to this would go, you'd be able to think, well, you'll stand up, you'll have to walk around this little stand we've got here that we've got our notes on. You turn the handle, the door will open, and I don't know, you'll walk out.
Yeah.
But that hasn't happened. But you've been able to visualize it and suppose it. You have essentially had a little view into an alternate universe where I stand up, walk over, and open the door.
Yeah.
You've either generated that universe yourself or you've looked in on it.
Yeah, right.
And what if you could then, is there a difference between you looking in on this other little universe of make-believe or it actually being a real universe you're looking in on?
Yeah.
And then, you have that ability to swap from observer to being a participant. So you're actually entering other universes through your imagination. I mean, is that sort of the way consciousness, imagination, and so forth works? Because a lot of animals don't seem to have a lot of imagination.
No.
Like
It's a human thing, isn't it?
Yeah, there's some ideas of evidence here and there, but not you're not seeing orangutans build an e-diff from a Formula One car.
No.
They're just not. They've none of them have painted the Mona Lisa. So you've got to think that there's something extra there that humans have.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. So if you've checked out this film, what stood out to you in terms of the sci-fi sort of element? Was this a sci-fi film to you, or was it a horror? Because it is a bit nightmarish. You've been telling me that you're planning on making a little short film. So
Yes.
How's that process going for you?
Well, it's a lot of education at the moment because it's one of those things where you're saying, oh yeah, you write a little script, and I've taken videos with my camera before.
Yeah.
But the thing is, having been on a film festival assessment committee, I've seen a broad spectrum
It's a very
of
official Space Brain
films.
Assessment Committee title.
And it's one of those things where when you watch a short film or a long film, whatever, there's times you sort of go, this just didn't look great. And then you watch some other one and you go, this just looks great. Even though they could be very similar in content. And so when I was thinking, there's this WA Made, which has got a mobile phone film category. And I thought, well, I've got a mobile phone. I can do that.
Yeah.
In fact, you have to just use your mobile phone to film it. You can do whatever post-production you wanted, but you got to film it mobile phone. So I thought, well, I could take a stab at that. I could make a 3-minute film, surely. That will only take me 6 to 12 months. But I thought to myself, I want it to look good.
Yeah.
I want it to look like a really good effort from a first-time maker. Like I don't want someone to look at it and go, no, that's the worst kind of happy snap filmmaking possible. I want someone to go, I can see that he's tried this and he's done this and he's, So I jumped onto YouTube and there's a couple of really great channels there and started watching filmmakers talking about. Someone like really pared down. Here's the rule of thirds.
Yeah.
Here's basic lighting. Like if you're going to, and in fact, specific little articles about if you're making a sort of a very low cast or a low crew, as in you and an actor type film, here's sort of how you can get some of the good looking stuff, like the total camera movements you can do without a gimbal and a drone and so forth, and the lighting. And when I watched that, I was went, that does make sense, because a lot of them they'd show with all of the fancy stuff, with all of the theory in practice, and then like what maybe a first time person would do.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I looked at that going, I would have done it the first time person way because I got no clue.
Yeah.
And when I was watching this film, I could see a lot of these things being put into play, like some of the lighting, the way shots were set up, marks were set and hit to make sure that the right things got in the frame. And so I'm doing that. It's this particular year you're supposed to make your short film around the theme of ghost, whatever that might mean. It doesn't have to literally be a dead person. It could be the word ghost. But the whole point is they're just trying to, it's like, it's giving you something to play with, and it kind of proves that you've made it for this film festival. So that's sort of what I'm looking to do. And I thought that would be an interesting exercise to get into.
Good creative exercise.
So keep an eye out for some time. I will be doing a call for an actor who likewise wants to be in a short film that doesn't have any money.
Yeah, well, we had a lot come to the film festival and obviously participate and be part of it. So
so it could be, and I'm thinking it will be a science fiction film because that's the way it is.
The science of ghosts.
Yeah, ghosts. Well, machine ghosts.
Yeah,
it would be. Anyway,
sounds exciting.
That is exciting. Have you got any further on filmmaking?
No, I feel, and I've said this previously, a bit at ground zero, I think, but things are bubbling and there's going to be a bit more space and time coming in the next couple of months. So, yeah, I think it's going to be definitely time. But it's a little bit like probably what happened to Matthew and Tori here, that sometimes the world throws you a bit of or life throws you a bit of a curveball, and so you've got to reassess. And these guys took the opportunity of COVID and went and shot a film, and I think that's probably where I'm at a little bit as well, like just kind of where life is at the moment, and maybe, for me it's like reassessing and deciding, okay, this is what I want to be doing, which is also, you can look at that in a really exciting way because it's sort of fresh start. Yeah,
it could be a summer production for you.
Yeah, that's right. So, just scrapping the plans I did think the plans I thought I had, I've sort of thrown them out and start again.
Sometimes that's the way it's got to go.
It's just the way it is. But anyway, it's all things are bubbling along, which is great. And we are getting lots of entries for the film festival. Actually, they're rolling in.
A couple more the other day came in. So that's I'm very excited by that because I'm very keen to start watching through these and doing the selection process. That won't be for a little while yet. No. We're lining up, a very exciting venue and we're reassessing the way we did the workshops. So the workshops are very popular, but we've gotten some feedback and we think we can do better.
Yeah. Well, we just want to keep it fresh and revamp and do it a little bit differently. But if you're out there, the main call for action right now is if you're out there, get cracking on your film. Like Surrey's planning to make a film for a different film festival. Well, you're the same. If you're out there, you've got a bit of time. The festival's in June, but don't sit on your butt too much. And people are already submitting. So we're in the early submission stage. If you're just hearing this for the first time, and it is still September 2022 and it's not September 2023, you've got time, but get cracking. So we'd love to see your science fiction films. And if you're someone that is local, like in Mandurah, there is a whole category for you, baby.
Oh, yeah. So, I even spoke with the local high school principal the other day and handed over a card and said, look, we do this. Particularly, we have a student youth category and a local Mandurah category. Mm-hmm. So someone from the media department, or studies of this high school, college, would qualify for both.
Yeah, for sure. So now's the time to get cracking. Film Freeway is where you can get, all your information and where you actually submit. Spacebrains, hit us up on the socials and on the website to learn more about it. And the festival is planned for June in 2023 in Mandurah. It'll be a physical festival, so you're going to have the opportunity to come along and potentially, if your film is picked, see it on the nice big screen.
Oh, look, the filmmakers who made it along were very pleased.
They had a great time.
To get the physical feedback of the viewers.
That's
and,
right.
of course, some of them got little trophies they get to walk away with, which is great.
And as a filmmaker, it's great to go to those events. So actually the film I acted in, which is very rare for me, but that was a mobile phone film. That was part of the WA Made Film Festival this year. It's been selected for the Rockingham Film Festival, which is in October. So there's going to be another screening. Very exciting to go to screenings, whether you're an actor or a filmmaker. So, get your film made, get it in there, and we look forward to having a look at it.
Yes.
So let's get into a bit about the plot.
Bit of the plot.
And some of the details. As I said, this is a nightmare on the screen. However you look at it, I really felt like it is a nightmare. But we need to go through some of the narrative points that will get us there. So we'll have a look at plot. We'll talk about some of the techniques. We've already been talking about them, but we'll kind of grab some of them along the way. As I said before, I think if you're a beginning filmmaker, hopefully you've watched it already by now, but if you're a beginning filmmaker or you're just striving like Surrey's deciding to make a mobile film, hey, this is a filmmaker. He has made feature films before this as well, and short films, and been involved in TV shows in Britain. And here he took the opportunity of COVID. Everything's locked down. The industry's paused. But hey, I still want to make something. Here's an opportunity. I've got a phone. We all walk around with these little micro computers in our pockets these days with sound recording, video recording, and publishing and editing capabilities. Why don't you go make something? You know?
I think I will.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So this was written, directed, most things by Matthew Butler-Hart.
Pretty much it's one of those credits where it's just Matthew Butler-Hart.
The things that weren't Matthew were Tori. And
right.
then there was a couple little features in there by Ian McKellen.
Yeah.
Gandalf
is in this.
We've got Conleth Hill, who's Lord Varys from Game of Thrones.
Yes.
And that's really it.
Yeah, that's it. And I think Wendy, which Tori and Matthew can correct us, but yeah, I don't know. She's a relative, I think, in there, or
Wendy
child, or
Muir-Hart.
I'm not sure. Anyway, and this was shot in released in March 2021. And they have publicly said it was an experimental film, making a film on an iPhone during lockdown.
It's got, there were a couple of people. So edited by William Honeyball, music by Tom Kane. And then there was some production companies in there. We better mention them as well. Fizz and Ginger Films.
Which is probably Matthew and Tori.
Probably Matthew and Tori.
But maybe not. And Amazon seem to get it sold or distributed by Amazon online.
I think it helped they had Ian and Conleth in there.
Yeah. Both of them have been.
If Ian McKellen wants to get in touch and do a bit of a vocal appearance on Spacebrains, why not?
Yeah, why not? Well, you might be able to get him in your film.
Yeah,
he's up for mobile films.
I will.
Yeah, send him an email.
Hopefully not as a ghost.
Well, he could be the ghost.
He could be the ghost. That would be really awesome. Machine.
Remember Tao? How Gary, is it Gary?
Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman. He's the voice, right?
Yes.
Like it's a brilliant voice. So.
Yes, I'll ask Gary Oldman as well. Why not?
Yeah, why not? So we do like to break the narrative down and just to have a quick run through into some key plot points. And these are plot points that you can find from all good story and script writing sort of books and teachers that are out there. Go check them out if you are a writer or a filmmaker and want to learn more about, what happens or how to make a feature film script. And what that means is it's basically a 3-act structure, and that is then broken down into what some of those teachers call beats, others called scenes, but pretty much just some specific moments in the plot. What happens in Act 1, sorry?
Act 1 is the introduction and the opening image. It shows us the world as it is at the start of the film, where we're coming from, which gives us a great little contrast for what happens later on in the film where things start changing. But before they change, we get a bit of a setup and a catalyst moment. So this is the inciting incident. I like to think of this is the moment where, as the audience, you go, this is what this film is about. Or maybe you could look at it as a question that Act 2 needs to start answering. In any case, it's a change in the main character, usually a main character, but it is a change in the world that must be addressed.
Yes.
And then there's a bit of debate, how best to address this change, how to react. Should I, do A or B? And one of those paths will lead into a bigger story, and the other path will lead to, stasis.
Yes.
Luckily, they all seem to break into two. They're going to Act 2, which is what's that all about?
Well, I think you described the beginning really well, as in, we've chosen this journey. The character has chosen. As you said, if they don't, they go back to bed.
Yes.
Or they die, or whatever it is, right? So, they have to choose a journey, and they do that. And Act 2 is basically then, well, what happens on that journey? It's some teachers, and I always like this expression from Blake Schneider, it's the fun and games, the trailer of the film. So this is what we get now for a good, 30 minutes or so, in a feature film, we get lots of, okay, they're going on this journey, and what are all the ups and downs of that? And it could be a bit silly. Even in a most serious film, this is where you might get a little bit of comedy, or romance is blossoming, relationships are developing, the job is going well, the sports team is winning the games, and pretty much that's what it is. It's them on the journey. If they're literally climbing a mountain, it's success. It's climbing. It's seeing the beautiful bird at some level of the mountain, it's seeing a sunrise and it's the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. And so that's what it's all about in the fun and games. And we get then to about a middle point of the story, and they've been on that journey, and something needs to now happen where it's a bit more of a smack in the face, and it is then like, oh, I thought this journey was about this, when it's actually about that. And you mentioned earlier, like in Groundhog's Day, Bill Murray kind of has to go, oh, yeah, I'm just now stuck in this loop. That's really the midpoint of Groundhog Day. Like he's had some fun and games of kind of playing with that world, and then now it's like, oh, hang on, I am actually just waking up. Is this a nightmare? That's his midpoint, right?
Is this everything it appears to be?
Yeah.
I'm stuck.
Yeah. So sometimes like that, and quite often the midpoint is a little bit on the darker side, and it leads the character down into some bleakness. If it's a film like Die Hard, it's Bruce Willis kind of realizing what kind of stakes he's up against and how serious these stakes are. And in fact, in Die Hard, it's Hans realizing that his wife is in the building, and being able to utilize the wife against Bruce Willis. So he's got like a card up his sleeve, good old Hans. And that leads us to things like the bad guys close in, so things kind of getting worse, so all is lost maybe moment, a dark night of the soul, something in here may die as well, or someone or something, or a dream, depending on the film. And really it gets to a point where things are pretty pear-shaped for the main character, and this is where they have to dig really deep and decide if they want to keep going. Do I keep going on this journey, or do I quit, really?
Yeah,
and that's the way I've always thought about it. Like, even when they're up against Hans in Die Hard, he could just quit and flee the building. The police are downstairs, So does a character, or, like I said, a character climbing a mountain, they're not yet at the top of the mountain. Do they just quit? Do they actually just quit?
Yeah, it's
and
gotten
kind of go
too
back?
hard.
Yeah, like had things gotten too hard. And hopefully if they make that decision, which takes all the courage and everything they've learned, that they go, oh, no, I'm going to carry on. That goes to Act 3.
They push through to Act 3, which is, funny enough, it's the finale.
Yeah.
It's where they gird their loins, as it were. They gather their resources, make a plan maybe, or they push for that final push for the summit.
Yep.
And they don't quite make it. You can't just have the very first idea that they have succeed.
No.
Because if it was that easy, they would have succeeded already. So that you always have some sort of hiccup along the way there where it suddenly turns it around a little bit and says, oh, hold on, not as easy as you thought.
Yeah.
But that's important because as people watching it, we don't want things to be easy. I read a book once where the story had no reversal.
Yeah.
It was just, they got this, oh, here's this difficulty. Oh no, what are we going to do? Everything seems hard. Oh, well, how about we do X, Y, Z? And you go, oh, it's not going to be that easy. No, they just did X, Y, Z and it all just worked out. And it's like, I felt like, oh,
the climax didn't give it to you.
What's going on there? That's just a complete letdown. So there's always or should always be something which makes it a little bit harder than it should be. It could be a literal reversal of a fight where you're bashing down the bad guy and then suddenly they pull something out and do something nasty, or it could be along those lines of where you think you're winning, but now there's actually a new stake. Hans Gruber has his wife at gunpoint right there when the building's about to blow up. You know, like, oh, okay, now that's even a lot harder than you originally thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But, he learns something and grows. The main character makes use of all of their experience of the film and pulls something off, or something happens to them. But it has some relevance to the previous parts of the film.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's kind of a Deus Ex Machina, I think. It's just kind of pulling magic out of your butt to make the story happen, which shouldn't be done very, unless you're like incredibly clever. But we're not. Don't assume you're that clever. And then we have the final image, which is how, after the final reversal and the actual climax, we have the final image which shows what this world is now at the end of the film, how it's changed or what's different about it. And that's basically it.
Yeah, that's our
once you've done that, you've made a hit movie.
You have.
Simple.
It's a total hit. It's a recipe.
Simple.
Simple. And just talk to people in Hollywood how simple
that's
it is.
why all movies are raging successes,
That's
and
right.
everyone loves every single one of them. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. So, but quite often good stories will have a lot of those common beats to them. And we seem to, now we've looked at 89 films, probably the better ones do hit those marks a lot closer. And then it's about doing them in interesting, original ways as well.
And
That's
there's all ways like, when you have the bad guys closing in all these lost dark night of the soul, you're getting the right balance of being bad enough that you go, oh yeah, that's bad, but not so bad that you turn the tone of the film over you're going, this was a romantic comedy, but now it feels like a
it's a horror,
nihilistic portrait of suicide or something. You go like, this is dreadful.
It's the tone has to also be.
But then you go the other way, because if you do have a nihilistic portrait of suicide, but it's kind of a little bit happy too much, then you're going, hang on, I was expecting to really cry and feel sick and unpleasant about this, and instead, no.
And maybe that's what Matthew and Tori were aiming for, because this film is quite bleak.
Oh, it is.
So, the look of it's not completely bleak. It's actually looks really natural, and the fact they shot it on an iPhone, I think, sort of demonstrates that. But the world, the world we're in, the story world, is extremely bleak, especially for this poor Jane. So, opening images, we have some sort of documentary style shots of Gandalf.
Gandalf is
telling us the science, telling us a bit about the setup of this parallel universe idea.
Yeah, I reckon if I was getting Ian McKellen in there, I would have got him to say, "You shall not pass," in some way.
In some way.
Yes.
I don't know if that's copyrighted, but that might be literally copyrighted.
You might have to change it up a little bit, but it's a documentary thing for witness. It's got like a little logo emblem, which is a triangle with radiating lights or something from it, and it's talking about an experiment and the possibility of expanding human capabilities. And we had to, we found these multiple worlds and they're at war or something funny.
Yeah.
And we get into cut then with someone running, like puffing and you expect being chased. There's flashlights about the place.
Seemed like military or police were chasing this person.
which ties in well with what the scientists are saying about, there's this conflict, and they found that the conflict is actually what's allowed them to study this phenomenon. And they've got to maintain this conflict.
Yeah. And so we do, you're right, we sort of have these quick cuts in with them going from the scientists into this world, and then we cut to, it's as though someone's been caught, and then that then continues to cut to this woman who's tied up in an attic or something.
And I believe that we're shown that it's an alternate UK, because there's sort of a London skyline, but the lighting's a bit funny, and there's airships.
Yes.
Which everyone loves. Everyone loves that airships.
Always the obvious way that we're not in our current.
But having airships, that kind of, to me, indicates maybe that World War II was a bit different.
Yeah.
And that we didn't have the Zeppelin Hindenburg disaster.
Yep.
Which, so that straight up tells you there's a different path here. Some spark didn't spark and cause that Hindenburg to explode.
Yeah.
And now we use airships.
Yes,
because
we still use airships.
They're cool.
Yeah, they're awesome. A very good way of transporting lots of cargo.
Yeah, it's just that we have
highly inefficient.
We just have better ways of doing it now, but that's probably because we just didn't develop airships. Anyway, but she's tied up. There's a woman in a suburban house. She's tied up in an attic. She comes to. She's panicky a bit, and she struggles to try and free herself. and she does. She knocks herself down and undoes her legs, and then her hands stay bound, I noticed, but she pulls her gag down. And at first she's panicky and confused, and then we get like a security camera view of her.
Video. Yeah.
And we know it's security camera because it's sort of low quality and it's got lines on it, which is one of these funny things that's become the trope of security cameras. Even though security cameras, particularly if you're doing a scientific study, you presumably use very high definition.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you? I mean, the iPhone they use to film this is in 4K.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you have security cameras?
I know,
at
we
least
talked
4K?
about this with the previous film, didn't we? A few episodes back, and it was the same thing when, modern day cameras wouldn't be doing that, and even internet reception's a lot better. But it's the trope,
expectation, because as soon as you see that sort of low saturation or desaturated sort of view with the interlaced lines, it's a security camera.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's being monitored.
And I guess it's also, in this context, we know, and it reinforces that it's like scientists or a research lab that's watching her. It's it's not a serial killer.
There's a bit of a voiceover.
There's always a difference there.
Voiceovers you hear, there's just indistinct
like scientists talking.
Words talking about subject one. But like there's multiple sort of sound voices like that. And what I notice here from a storytelling or tech point of view is after one of the first flash, so she gets herself off, but then gets flash, and she's tied up again. Just when because at this loop she gets a bit more rational and kind of calm. Yeah. But it starts when it goes flash and she appears back there. The shot is a camera is low to the ground, looking in a mirror, seeing her, which as we should all know, when you use reflections to show the main action, then you're sort of indicating there's a barrier here. There's something strange. Yep. Maybe there's a different world or a different view, and it could just be that you're trying to indicate that maybe the character's viewpoint is not 100% correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're even and the classic one is that the first Spider-Man with William Dafoe, in the Green Goblin, how he talks to himself in the mirror.
Yes.
And, Sam Raimi did that, and William Dafoe, that brilliant acting scene. If you want to be an actor, go check out that scene where he jumps from being, I don't know, the doctor's name. Do you know what the doctor's name is? Whatever the doctor's name is. No, and then to the Green Goblin, and he slowly and they just cut it so that it's like he's having that conversation with himself. And that is the perfect example of also what a mirror does symbolically mean in film, which is like the mirror is a reflection. It's not real. It's a construction. It's an alternate version of oneself.
Yeah.
You look at yourself in the mirror. It's not actually you in the mirror. It's your reflection. And so you're exactly right. And he does this repeatedly in this film, doesn't he? He shows us the reflections.
Yeah, and including off water as well, which again is one of these.
It's another one.
Portal sort of views, which is kind of cool. And I, I've been keeping my eye on this because I have been doing a lot of research at the moment about how to do film, because I'm trying to find the most effective ways of giving that cinematic is the word, cinematic view, rather than just like some bloke with a phone, which is fine, but because that's what I am, but I would like to try and do these things, and that's one way of doing it is weird angles and mirrors and water and
symbols,
that sort of thing.
Symbols, add in the symbols.
That's what they call it.
So we're pretty much in this setup, I found, that we kind of have that loop. I think it happens about 3 times by memory. And it's pretty much her getting off the chair. As you say, each time as well, she, so it's the Groundhog Day kind of lock. The Groundhog Day loop. And she's sort of tied up, falls off, kind of tries to get herself free, and then wakes up again. She's tied up again, falls off. She does it a bit faster, kind of gets out, looks out the window. She gets a bit of a split image at one moment, I think, very quickly, like looking out the mirror.
Burning flames.
Yeah, flames and soldier with a gun. And again, you don't really see everything, but you sort of hear things. And then it kind of comes back to this reality. When she does look out the window, we do see like a very deserted English suburban street, I would describe it as. But it doesn't seem to be anyone around. And yeah, I think she went through the loop 3 times. And it's like, I'm pretty sure it was that 3rd time. This to me is the catalyst, because she kind of has that moment of like, oh, if I get a bit worked up, it resets itself.
Yeah.
She doesn't understand the process. We don't understand the process, audience. But to me, that was kind of the catalyst.
Yeah, and she's doing sit-ups, bit of exercise.
Yeah.
Which is, if you're a prisoner, and quite tellingly, her hands are still bound at this point, which again, I think is a bit of a symbol of her not being quite in control of herself. She's not free yet. She's not in Act 2 yet.
Yeah.
She doesn't unbind her hands until she's in Act 2, and she can have some fun and games.
Yeah.
But she spots the hatch in the floor, and she goes down those stairs, and then she goes down the stairs again. We get a little flash, and she realizes that she's been going down the stairs a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so she takes her little gag off and puts it there as a reminder, just to see, is this the same stairs I'm going down, or just really long staircase? And sure enough, she goes down and she comes down and there's her gag there. But then she checks around her neck, is the gag still? So you know, okay, this is something really not ordinary is going on here. This is not just her brain making things up. There's something very strange happening.
Yeah, and I think in that moment she loses her cool, and that's when it resets itself all again.
Yes.
And there's also in that reset time she's tied up again that it's as though she knows where the steps are. So it's like she's kind of been given that, like she already knows the answer to the next bit. And so then she quickly goes and opens it up again and goes down the steps.
And this time when it flashes, though, she then is walking up the steps.
Yeah.
Out of the basement.
Yeah.
And this I think is where we're getting to Act 2.
Yeah.
Because she's, the catalyst is there that we've been introduced to the idea that she's, trapped, but that she's not trapped ordinarily. Like there's some sort of a loop, there's some sort of play going on here. Yeah,
well, to me, it's almost like Super Mario Brothers, the video game. It's almost like if you fall down that hole, you go back to the start. That's what it felt like. Like it almost felt like a computer game to me.
Yeah, she hadn't learnt.
She hadn't learnt the rules yet. Like you have to. You need to, press your controller a particular way to jump over the hole, and then you don't have to fall down the gaping hole in the floor.
Yeah, get eaten by the plant or whatever.
Right? Like you're like, that's how it works. Like that, you have to jump over the plant. And so, it felt to me that her realizing that with the steps was her realizing like the rules of the game.
One thing that I noticed in particular when she's coming into, up out of the basement stairs which is, as we said, sort of Act 2, is there's little bits of old music which do remind me of British war films or films in that era, as that was the sort of 1940s music playing. But she walks past a rather prominent picture of some lions.
Yeah, she does, doesn't that's right? Yeah,
which I thought, because again, this is one of those things where this is the choice of decor was intentional.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I think, because it could have been a countryside scene or something, but instead it was like lions looking, strongly towards the camera. This idea of this predatory danger going on, and she goes into the other room and hears voices.
Yeah, well, I think that in that hallway where the lions, you see the front doors all barricaded.
Yes.
And then it's like this noise, and it sounds like soldiers on the outside. Oh, we'll check the front door, and the door sort of rattles, or the noise of the door rattles. Again, very clever, cheap filmmaking there. Total sound, that's probably Matthew being the voiceover, and even Tori again, because it sounded like there was a male and female voice. Oh, we'll check the front door. Oh, it's not. Oh, it's locked. Oh, that's great. And you hear the footsteps, and it's really great. Independent filmmaking like because she panics, she hops down. You don't need another actor. You just Tori can still hold the scene, and it's just
and that's just done in post anyway. So as a number of those sorts of things were
and
it's interesting here because now when we're talking fun and games, we're talking about exploring this concept of this being we already know that she sort of resets. We don't know the nature of that, but by given that scene where she had the gag around her neck and the gag there, yeah, you're going, oh, we expect some play off this.
Yeah.
And we do. Sure enough, she like you suggested with a computer game, she sort of solves the puzzles as she goes along. She goes in and she dings the piano and hears some stuff and doesn't do much. She wanders.
Like there's a piano. There's like someone else plays the piano, right? Which she had done in the previous version.
Yeah, and then she finds her way outside and finds a car.
Yeah.
No keys. And then she goes inside and we get some weird flashing and she sees herself picking up the keys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, looking a little bit quizzical, she wanders out, opens up the granny flat or the garage, wherever it is, takes the keys off the hook where there's a little blood smear. Yeah. And continues on. And we sort of get little extra steps further along each time as we go through until we get that the really great one where she goes down and she goes into the granny flat. I don't know what there's like a little side office thing. Yeah. And she doesn't have the bandage on her arm, her hand. No. But while she's sort of pulling out compass or whatever, she cuts herself and goes, and wraps that rag around her hand and she goes, picks up the keys and leaves the blood smear. Yeah. So you're not just getting multiple takes, but they're out of order. Yeah. Or certain things haven't happened in some takes. Yeah. Which again is giving you that idea that this isn't just looping sequentially. It's not the same thing looping. It's just very similar things looping.
And so this is all the fun and games, isn't it? This is all the kind of trailer moments of the film, And each time she's trying to start the car and it won't start. And so then one time she does venture off down the road. Again, we have the empty streets. She's walking and trying to figure out via a map where to get to. And suddenly it's like soldiers are on top of her. And this is where we do get the researchers, don't we? We get the researchers telling us, something like if the subjects veer too far. Yes. And so it's like she kind of has a reset. And this is where, for me, it was like, oh, right, she's in this weird game thing which she's trying to get out of it. Again, to me, the context of like Super Mario Bros. Is like, oh, you can't venture that far. You've gone to the boundary of the game or something. And it resets, and again, she reminds herself of the keys, and then this time the car starts, and it's, to me, that was kind of we're getting to the midpoint, because when the car starts, it's her realizing that she can sort of, because she remembers the walking and the walking not working, and seeing those different things with the keys. And now the car starts. It's like she knows that it's like she can actually access this control of the other bits of the world.
Yeah.
The other bits that have already, and I think the impression at this point in time is it's all the versions. I was thinking it's all the versions she's already done.
Yeah.
But we learn later that in fact, no, it's maybe accessing the other versions at the once.
Yeah.
Like you were saying before about opening the door.
Yeah. And I think for me, the midpoint, there was a very particular reset. So she drove along and kept getting stuck at that intersection.
Right.
Over and over and over. And she gets upset, and then there's a particularly long-lasting flash on the screen. And then she wakes up, and we get a bit of a voiceover, which I wrote a little bit down.
Yeah, yeah.
Which it says something along the lines of, because I was touch typing as fast as I could, so I might have missed a couple words here and there. But it says, repetition of the same day allows us our constant. Being able to reset the subject when they reach a mental or emotional peak. This allows the subject to see glimpses of other days and eventually controlling reality.
Yeah. So that is the midpoint, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the midpoint, because that's when she gets in the car and immediately starts, because she knows how to do this now, and she drives off, and she gets out into the country finally. And we actually see a bird, which is the first living creature we've seen, which to me was that sort of symbol of freedom. Like she's attained that she's no longer bound to the house, which indeed she kind of does go back, but we don't see that again. We don't see her doing that. We always catch up with her
kind of back
driving out in the country. Yeah. So she's out in the country now, and trying to find this witness. She's found some documentation in the car, and she's seen the logo somewhere else, and so she decided she needed to do it. She has this walkie-talkie, and she's talking to other versions of herself on there, which is interesting. It never directly reveals that, except it sounds like her on the other end, and the conversations they're a little bit disjointed. Yeah, they're not quite flowing, which gives you the feeling that
it is
maybe the herself on the other end is not exactly responding to the herself that's talking to her. It's like she says one thing in the walkie-talkie, but maybe the other self hears a different version, and so when they respond, she's hearing back a different response. Yeah.
Part of the nightmare, really. So she's on the country. They do the loop again. It's sort of like the loop is stuck. It's stuck.
Yeah, and she gets walking out in the country, finds the VW camper.
Yeah.
Which there was some imagery there of the streams and so on. And I'm noticing that she seems to spend a lot of time. It seems to loop with her at dusk or dawn every time, which I happen to know is because of lighting.
Oh.
Because if you've got
the magic hour,
if you've just got, because I was watching this particular YouTube clip, tutorial about doing, you're the only crew, so you've got an actor and a camera, and that's it. How do you do this? And one of the things I said is, make use of that sunset, sunrise, that dawn, dusk lighting, because then you don't need an expensive lighting rig because the lighting's actually quite nice.
Yes.
And particularly if you then get you can start with the sun just peeking up, and so you can get some nice, strong, sharp shadows, but then you also get that sort of dawn light. And
it's called the magic hour.
Yeah,
it's that lovely light.
I noticed that she's wandering. Most of her outdoor scenes are at that time.
They chose the magic hour.
Yes, but they keep looping her to that time, so it's kind of works in. It's not just, and you wouldn't notice it if you weren't thinking about it, I think, but I was.
So we've got it's a good tip there as well. So we've got the kind of the moments someone dies and we get this version of her on the road.
Yes.
As you mentioned before, getting run over.
Yeah.
Maybe every time.
The funny thing is the version on the road doesn't look like she's doing the right sort of thing on the road. She runs forward and goes up on her tippy toes and then crouches down as if she's hiding, but she's just in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
And then she looks around at the van, and the first time she swerves off the side, but the woman's gone, and she loops a bit and has to come back. And then finally she goes, "No, it's not real. It's not real." And goes through, and she doesn't hit anyone. Yeah, which turns out when we see that version in her reality, that she dies there anyway. I can only imagine she's the version that always dies.
Yeah.
like how cruel is that? Because she's crashing behind the wall and she shoots a gun off at someone.
Yeah.
And then she gets hit by a van that doesn't exist. Yeah. So, I mean,
that's
shit happens, isn't it?
Yeah. That's her nightmare.
Yeah. Like I said, is that worse or better? I don't know.
But she reaches the grounds of this research facility, university or whatever it is.
Yeah, big mansion
place.
What a great looking place that is.
I know, the doors and...
I'm wondering if that was a school.
I felt like it was probably a university or something.
Yeah, which is why it was empty, because Tori and Matthew would have just called up and said, I noticed that classes are all closed, because there was even a computer lab and a little chapel and things. So.
Yeah. Well, also quite often universities can be very open to allow people to film and take photos. And
why not?
It's kind of half public. It's not public property, but it kind of half is, and maybe this is as well. Maybe you're allowed to just wander around this place.
Yeah.
So you can just kind of walk there with the iPhone and who cares?
They had no other visitors in there, so why not?
So she does find this place, and there's she has that photo, doesn't she, of the researcher, Colin?
Yeah. We do get a bit more of these sort of more and more now. We're getting overlaps. Yeah. So we see her. She goes in and she hears an organ blast and goes, "Oh, what's going on?" And she runs and investigates, and it's her going up there, and she finds the organ and hits the keyboard.
Yeah.
And then the one downstairs that you can see sort of reacts.
Yes.
And she goes through and she's more and more now. She's getting these weird sort of flashes which show a particular doorway.
Yeah.
Which she finally manages to get down to that corridor.
Yeah, and sees the actual door.
And finds this doorway and it's locked. But she steps back and concentrates for a bit.
Yeah.
And it goes click. And she opens it up and she steps in and she glimpses a bunch of different realities. So she sees the dancing.
Yeah.
And, props to you, Tori. You look like a good dancer.
Yes.
And because, they couldn't afford to buy a body double. So they actually had Tori dancing. Fantastic.
And there's researchers.
And researchers there, and then the monster in the dark. That's quite frightening.
I thought, even though you don't see it, was like a lion. So going back to that picture of the lion, so that sort of foreshadowing that you had the portrait of the lions, and then it was kind of like a lion, but you just saw the eyes.
But the thing that I like here, she does find her DVDs. I'm like, DVDs, really?
Yeah.
2021, they must have really searched hard for a DVD. Well, that's why I think it's probably a school. The school probably still has like VHS.
Library still.
One of those rolling stands with the TV on top. And
got to still have one of them
it's
somewhere.
Padlocked on there, because someone's going to steal it. Well, it's probably worth money now. It's like a vintage. But she finally finds her way into that crossroads where she sees herself, looking far more relaxed and refreshed and quite comfortable, sort of curled up on this chair reading a book, and talks to her and talks to a few other versions of Jane that can't be seen.
Yes.
But talks to her and says, oh, yes, I've seen you before and I'll see you again a few more times, I'm sure. You're the one that can't, who's always lost.
Always lost.
Always lost.
It's very depressing.
And she's like, a bit wide-eyed and there's she gets obviously emotional peak. She freaks out and clips back, and sure enough, she's kind of repeating again all of this sort of thing. We get some more sort of documentary snips there talking about the fact that there's multiple universes, and then we get credits.
Yeah, well, no, we get the one where she says, doesn't she say something like she gives in, and then they say, oh, well, subject unknown, cease subject unknown. So it's like they shut it down.
Yes.
I don't know exactly what the wording was, and then she kind of looks at camera, and then it's cut to credits.
Disconnect subject.
Yeah,
is the last word. Yeah, that's the last word.
So it's like she's been told that the loop, her loop is the nightmare. She wants to fight that one last time. She asks to get out, and then it's like subject disconnect.
Yeah, which
I'm not sure what that actually means.
Does that mean now she's not going to loop anymore? So she's not going to, but she is lost all the time.
Yeah.
Oh.
But again, it felt like a nightmare because it's like, well, is she never get out of the nightmare?
I know. This is that bit where it really hit me, because it was, again, where I thought normally in these looping things, we see the protagonist struggle through to break the loop. They somehow change something about their lives or existence and improve. And in this one here, and you've got to think, of course, if you do have these multiple worlds, there's got to be a path that will be led, which is crap, and always crap.
Yeah.
You got the ones where she's successful and where she learns things and is happy and all the rest of it. But this is the one that didn't get those benefits.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end of the actual plot points of the film. So where did you put this onto a bit of a viewing schedule with the other Space Brain films that we've had a look at?
With the other ones, well, I actually want to put in with one that we haven't done yet, but I won't, because I think we should do the map of small and perfect things.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's called. That's a pretty cool movie. We'll do that sometime soon. But no, this one here, it is more experimental in nature. I liked the idea of putting it in there with some of the experimental sort of films did.
Yeah.
Let me just find out what they were. So I turn my back.
Turn your back to me to find out where you should watch this. And whilst you do that,
how about you? How would you tell us?
Talk about my 3 viewing pleasure recommendations for this film. So I think if you took a trilogy of films, we looked at Anon, right? The Anon one.
Yes, with the woman who was in a fire and her records got lost.
Yeah, and it was the murder mystery, Clive Owen. Amanda Seyfried won. And then we also take another British sci-fi, which we did way back at the start, The Beyond. Again, kind of traveling across time and space, and also very much putting the brain into the, to the astronaut sort of idea. I think if you watched these three films around each other, they're all kind of mind-bending ones. They're all kind of ones to think about the reality that we live in. They're all ones that push that a little bit and experiment with that. And I do remember that, like, even The Beyond, it's kind of a little bit of a nightmare as well, and Anon is a little bit of a nightmare setup.
Yeah.
Different outcomes to this film. But, yeah, again, the worlds are all distorted. Maybe even Dark City would be another one that would be good.
Yeah, it is a bit Dark
kind
City,
of,
like, isn't it?
Mixed into this
because
as well.
that's sort of a repeating life
like a
as well.
shifting of the world to benefit. Yeah,
the aliens keep doing this experiment over and over again.
That's true
to try
as well.
and
Yeah.
learn.
So again, that would be probably another one, the Alex Proyas one, to come in here as well. So yeah, maybe those sort of 3 or 4, I think, really kind of push your mindset in the world that you live in.
Okay, well, I'm looking at The Lobster.
Okay.
That was like number 2,
Yep.
I think we did.
Yep.
But that's likewise. It's this sort
That's
of
another one. Yeah.
film that it leaves you with that unsettling ending, which is where you go. If you haven't seen the film, go watch it. It's a film that I can see quite polarizing. There'd be people like me who think it's just really very excellent. It's a great dark comedy.
This film is polarizing as well, because
Yes,
it is
so.
at the end, you're like, oh God, like, is she just dead then? Is that just it? Or is she free of this parallel universe? So yeah, that's a good way of putting it, actually.
I Am Mother's the other one piece. I Am Mother is likewise, it does reveal there, again, spoilers in case you haven't seen it, but it reveals at the end there that this artificial intelligence has been kind of looping people. So if you recall, because I know you've all seen it, you better
If you haven't paused, go
you
watch
haven't
it.
seen it, go pause, because I'm about to like totally spoil it for you.
Yeah.
But it starts off where the robot revives a fetus and raises, and we see a child getting raised, and then we finally end up with this daughter character, who's the main protagonist throughout this film. But it's revealed later on, of course, that she's not the first one raised. And she's like number 3 or 5 or something or other.
Yeah.
But it seems that she managed to pass enough tests, because the previous ones were terminated earlier, but she's somehow passed some unknown test, which seemed to be involved actually fighting back against Mother. And then she's been left to this world to supposedly raise more humans in a world entirely controlled by Mother. Which, again, is this kind of solely unsettling. It's like, well, did she actually pass the real final test, or is it just that stage?
Yeah.
And, they'll let her raise a new child and see how that works out. And if that doesn't work out so good, burn the whole lot down again, start over.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of
disturbing.
that same sort of feeling, I think.
Yes. Yeah, that feeling is a good feeling.
Yeah.
It's a very unique feeling. And I think that's what I meant earlier with that scene of the feet going down the steps in this film, that it's designed by the filmmaker to make you uncomfortable as an audience. And films do that. Sometimes they can make you uncomfortable. And we all, as an audience, have our threshold of enjoyment, of anxiety, of uncomfortableness. And this is where you're starting to move into not just like, just film as an entertainment, but film in the art form as well. That, this is making me uncomfortable.
Yeah,
and there's ways to do that. Like, a story could just be really disturbing. Hannibal Lecter eats people's faces. Yeah. But so you could go, no, I don't want to watch any more of this, right? Like that could be your cut point. So the story point, or is it like something like this where you're like, oh, that is a real nightmare. I don't know if I want to. Do I really want to know that?
Yeah.
Do I want to feel that feeling, that uncomfortable feeling?
I got that feeling watching Trainspotting.
Yeah.
Where you see them, very purposefully injecting heroin and then flopping back uselessly. Like, it's a sort of. I read someone
swimming in the toilet.
Someone said that Trainspotting glorifying drug use, and you're like, did you watch that film? That was a nightmare scenario.
And there's that one, Requiem for the Dream, that I know is very disturbing. And Darren Aronofsky, who just now is having some huge success with that film called The Whale or whatever it is with Brendan Fraser. That's kind of doing very well. But yeah, like my wife, we saw Requiem all those years, and it still disturbed her, because of what happens in that film. And again, you could go, oh, that's glorifying drugs. Like, oh God, well, you see what happens to those people, like their life.
I don't think you're watching the same film.
I don't think you're watching the same film there, yeah. Or you're not picking up on the intentions of the filmmaker. So, yeah, so that is an interesting one, is these films pushing us. Lobster, definitely, you're mentioning that. Now I'm really thinking of it. I think that's probably a good one to watch with that. So any of the films on the ladder that we've looked at that are real mind-bending, upsetting, disturbing, probably work with this film.
Tao, we mentioned that would probably work.
That's probably another one.
That was not at all what I was expecting.
No. So
it glorifies artificial intelligence.
That's right. It's all the kids are going to be into AI, aren't they?
Just filthy.
Yeah. So what about the science element? Sorry, this film, as we said, really clearly taking a potential hypothetical science and also throwing in some fiction and making it an extremity of that.
To tell you the truth, I was actually kind of thinking about looking at airships.
Okay, yeah.
Because they're cool, but I'm not going to. Because
collective
Oh, no, airships. No, instead, I thought we might talk a little bit more about the multiple worlds interpretation of quantum physics. I think I've mentioned it before in the past, but
we have talked about it.
I think this is a little bit of a discussion on that here, and we're going to start with Erwin Schrödinger.
Oh.
And we've all heard of Schrödinger. He's the dude who wants to kill cats apparently with poison gas. That's his famous experiment with the cat in a box in order to highlight how somewhat odd or ridiculous superposition is, quantum states are. But Schrödinger, so he postulated this equation, Schrödinger's equation, which is what the multiple worlds interpretation stems from. And he did that in 1925. Like, he was a really clever guy. I don't know if anyone knows this, but he was very, very with it. He published it in 1926, and he won the Nobel Prize in 1933 thanks to his work in this field. So his equation, the Schrödinger equation, it's a way of describing a quantum system. So a quantum system being basically where we're talking about fundamental sizes of things, photons and things that get measured by lengths of photons, as opposed to a macroscopic classical physics, which is a person drinking from a drink bottle, for example.
Right.
Just, pull out of my mind, highly imaginative. So it describes quantum systems as they evolve through time. You can rearrange this equation to describe a couple of things, but we're talking about evolving through time. So the equation takes in environmental conditions which act on a system and allows the description of that system when a measurement is taken. So that's kind of a bit abstract, and it is. And that measurement then allows for prediction of what's going to happen at other points in time as well, because this equation is about variation of a system through time. So what we could do, we could think of, say, two particles that have been entangled, for example, by being brought into sufficiently close proximity. And I'll get you a bit of a more practical example. So roughly speaking, if you had two balls, like tennis balls, or billiard balls is another one, and they're rolling towards each other, and you're just listening, and you hear them clank, and so they've rebounded.
Yeah.
They are what's called as entangled. And they're entangled in that. We can go, okay, let's have a look at one ball and how it's rolling. We know the initial state of the two balls before they got too close and banged. And now we look at this one that's rolling. We go, it's rolling in this direction at this speed. We know now, without even looking at the other ball, how fast it's rolling, because they weigh the same and they rebound in a known way. So we already know what direction the other ball's going off in, and how fast it's moving. So that's an entangled system, because by looking at one part of it, the other one the answers to, which is basically the same as. So they're talking about entangled particles are such that they basically get up all in each other's grill, and then even if you send one of them off somewhere else, you can look at one of them and you'll know the answer to the other one.
Right.
So that's entanglement. And the many worlds interpretation, then, because we'll get back to this entanglement bit in a moment, it was proposed in 1957, so about 20 odd years later after Schrodinger's equation, and everyone's running around. There's like this Copenhagen interpretation, which sort of talks about wavefront collapses and things. But anyway, there's American physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. So he goes, well, hang on, let's look at this a slightly different way. Rather than saying a wave function collapse in which we have this concept of superposition. So if you think of Schrodinger's box with his cat in it, and we don't know if, instead of the cat being dead, let's say that the little sensor goes off and a sardine is dropped. So we don't know if the cat is well fed or is a little bit hungry. And until we open that box, we can say it is both well fed and hungry.
Yes.
Until a measurement is made.
Great.
If we have no other thing. And then when we open that, that's when, bang, it's one of those things or the other.
Yeah.
Something has definitely happened.
Yeah.
So that's a wave function collapse. So Schrodinger's equation can be seen as a wave function because it describes something through time, much like a wave passing through time. But, that has its own problems, of course, which is, how come then this, magically, by measuring one thing, we know magically these other things? Like, that's kind of crazy. I mean, there's various theories as to how all that works, and it's not super crazy, but it's just as crazy as superposition, which is like, well, how can the cat both be well fed and not fed? So he says, well, let's not have wave function collapse, but rather let's say that in the billiard balls that are bouncing off each other, let's say the two balls simultaneously exist with all possible state, and we're only able to interpret the universe through a single viewpoint to see one of the possible states. So these balls are flying towards each other and they're going to clang off each other. Yeah. And there's lots of different directions they could bounce based on where they start from and air movements and how hot and cold things are. Let's just say, well, it all happens. And there's one version of us which sees it goes off that direction, one version sees it goes that direction, but it's gone in all directions. Yeah. It's not a singular item. Now, this introduces an interesting idea into our universe. So when you're talking superposition, you're talking probabilities, and you're flipping coins, or you're opening boxes, or you're smacking balls together, whatever. Don't smack your balls together. Feed cats, flip coins. You can flip coins. Just don't bet on it. Gambling's bad. But anyway, what you're talking about there is you have unknown outcomes. You've got probability. You flip a coin, it's a 50-50, it'll be heads or tails. But if it will always be heads and it will always be tails, the universe becomes deterministic, which is to say that given an input, or the output is determined. There's no chance of it happening. It will happen. Yep. Just because you didn't see it happen doesn't mean it's not happened to a different version of you that also saw it happen. So we don't have probability. And that's to say, if you were to roll a dice and you say 1 in 6 chance of something happening, no, all 6 numbers would turn up at some point, and probably one of them where the dice rolls off the table and everyone goes, oh, geez, go get that damn thing. Natural 20, which you can't get a natural 20, but we'll get to that. So there's certainty, which now I'm going to bring this back around to the movie in a second, which is what makes the movie quite horrifying, really. But then the question is, does that mean that anything can happen at any time? Could you roll a dice with 6 sides and get a 20? And the answer is no, because it's only things that can happen will happen. So from a starting point, say a coin that has 2 sides, we'll ignore the third edge, it can only flip to a heads or it can flip to a tails. It can't turn into a mouse. Like there's just no pathway. It's outside of the bounds of the wave described by Schrodinger's equation. Like there's no point where you can make a measurement of a coin and it will become a car. Or more, electron won't spontaneously become a proton, is what they're saying. So if you're shooting electrons out of a gun, you're not going to start measuring protons. You'll still be measuring electrons.
It does raise a really weird question, but in my mind, which is, so a coin, it's obvious with 2 sides.
Yes.
But let's say someone is getting results from an exam, like an exam out of a physics exam.
Yes.
Is there 100, because it's out of 100, is there 100 possibilities? Because there's 100 marks.
100 possibilities, as in...
is it in one of those virtuals, in one of those universes, they get 100 out of 100, and then in another they get
Yeah.
99 out of 100. But in the same context, if you're saying I'm flipping this coin, there's only really two options.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, so
So once the person has done the test, you've already got the knowledge of what their results is. But if you go back to an early enough state, then they could get anything there. So they could have studied harder.
Yeah,
and learned it and got the 100.
There's 100 variables,
and
right?
and this is where we go to Jane and this experiment is in why she's always the one who's lost, because you've got to think that the experiment starts at some point A, and it's at that point where the experiment starts that branching happens.
Yeah.
So then
That's what I mean.
from that point, there was one branch where Jane travels, Jane's experience that we watch in the film starts traveling down one branch, and every time there's a new chance for opportunity, you get a branching. But you can reach that point where the branching can never get back to the other branches.
Yeah.
So this would be, you could imagine if you're walking along and your leg falls off, you've now gone down a branch and you can't ever get to the same branch where you're walking along, your leg didn't fall off and you continued your training and you run a marathon.
Yeah.
Now your leg's fallen off. You can't get back to that branch where you train and run a marathon.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably not a good example because you can get on artificially. But you see what I'm saying here is you're not going to run a marathon with two legs because you've only got the one leg.
But that's what I mean. Like someone could,
and so now you're on a new set of branches which
someone could do a physics
path.
test which enabled them to get into university, enabled them to get some sort of job, enable it's like that could be their
and they
path,
end up
right?
as the first astronaut on Mars.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But then at the same time, that same person could have got 5 out of 100 on the test.
Yeah.
And then they didn't go to uni, they didn't continue with physics, and they went down a different path, became a drug dealer, whatever, right? Like
pharmacist, I think it's called.
They led a life of crime, for example. You know what I mean? They never would have gotten to the moon.
Yeah, and in
so
fact,
they're too truncated.
and now that's a branch cut off from them. Like
from the other version.
they're no longer even on a path that could lead to
you'd never get there.
Mars. Yeah, and that's where we're talking about with Jane here. She, to be the one who's forever lost would mean that there was some branching point at the start of the experiment where there was the Jane who just sails through and has her high emotional points that get reset on, she scraped her hand while gardening the roses. What a bother. Oh, flash, reset. She's back eating her toast and crumpets. That's the path she's on. She'll never be on that path where she encounters a hideous monster in a dark room. That's not going to happen. But poor old Jane we followed, which is the horror of this, was on that path and she can never get off that path. The best of her path is still the lost path, which, and I think that's the real horror of all of this. You can view it though from the point of view of a whole universe. So the different worlds in this interpretation are not separate universes. The universe is all the worlds in a big Schrodinger's equation, wave itself, which contains all of that possibility.
Yes. Yeah.
Evolving over time. Yeah. And that's how this interpretation deals with conservation of energy. Because if you were to, start splitting universes every time a quantum event happens, you're getting more and more energy. There's more and more matter in the universe. Unless, if you're getting different universes. But if you're actually looking at the whole universe being the culmination of all possible worlds, then in the one equation, then, some of those worlds will in fact decrease in energy. So you get the one where the universe dies of a heat death in 5 billion years and never gets an Earth. Yes. Just because a bit of an effect of Maxwell's hammer, if you ever heard of that thought experiment. But basically, everything just loses energy out and it just dies off quick. And there'll be another one that lasts an extra, 5 billion years longer than everything else.
Yes.
But in totality, it will equate to being the same amount of everything, if you like.
Yeah, right. It's poor little Jane.
Poor Jane.
As her truncated branch.
But it did raise that interesting point where Jane was able to swap realities, or
she could
where
see.
either she could see into other realities or she could jump onto those other paths, like where the car worked, for example, where the door was unlocked. But Yeah, and I think that's a really fascinating that could spawn a whole other movie. Like you can imagine some sort of other movie where someone, they're not looping in time and so forth, but they're starting to see other branches head off and learn to pick a branch, and then you're going to end up with that dramatic moment where they find themselves on a branch where there's some terrible fate seems to be locked onto that branch. They can't get off. As we said, you reach a point where you've missed the last exit. You can't exit your current trajectory. Yeah. Doesn't matter how hard you try, you'll never become the astronaut that lands on the Mars.
That's right.
That would be an interesting film in itself. But that's very, very clever. There's a bunch of other different interpretations of physics and quantum, but that's the Everett multi-worlds, which seems to be what they are following and here.
For
and
sure.
It's absolutely mind-blowing stuff. And this is why so many movies invoke the word quantum in order to perform magic.
Just to explain stuff.
Because there is a certain point, and a lot of the times it is kind of nonsense, but there's still kind of a certain point at the fuzzy edges where you can just sort of say, they collapsed a sun and used all of that energy to quantum something. Magic, boom, happens, and you go, okay, well, I guess, you got a lot of energy and you compress it to a really small point. I'm not really sure what happens at that point, like a new universe is born maybe or something. Who knows? But that was pretty good.
That is. It's an awesome idea, this film. Really interestingly shot. I think there's so many learnings in here for people like you and I and others that are starting out. And it's just a real lesson in a filmmaker or filmmakers, Matthew and Tori, kind of using what they've got, which is always a thing for film, especially independent filmmakers.
I know. I spotted a few little techniques that she's in the dark at one point, Jane, and she's holding a lamp. Yep. And anyone who's actually gone camping and used one of those lamps is you've got to hold them down low out of your face because you can't see anything. But in this, in
film, you need it near the face.
She's holding it right up next to the face, looking around, which looks natural in the film as it turns out. But it also gives that good lighting, which how else are you going to achieve that?
That's right.
Without, because she was moving through the woods and it's just the cameraman and her. There's not like another person carrying a diffuse box and a reflector and on a dolly able to sort of roll it along. It's like none of that's going on.
No, there's not even a reflector happening.
But there's a lot of those sorts of things, those little techniques and tricks and cheats and hacks to sort of bring out the best.
Yeah, for an independent film. Yeah, that's what you need to be doing.
I'll probably be looking back at this film when I'm planning my film.
Yeah.
I'll be looking back at certain scenes to see how the camera was moved and how the lighting was done.
So, go check it out and let us know what you thought about the episode. Give us a rating if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, or review, or hit us up on our socials and leave a comment or two about this particular episode, this film. I got feedback again the other day from a guy in Thailand through Instagram that he's been listening along. So, and he's really excited and he's working with some young people that are all into the Marvel sci-fi sort of universe.
Oh, yes.
So he was asking me a couple of questions via Instagram that way.
Oh, I watched Thor: Love and Thunder the other night.
Oh, yeah.
That was fun.
Good? Yeah. The Taika
Waititi. He's had an absolute rise in attention.
He's a monster at the moment in the film industry, and good on him. Good on him. And also, it's interesting with Thor. Like, they gave him a chance with the last one, and then with this one, he wasn't sure whether he wanted to do it again. And then he said, "Well, yeah, if I can kind of bring my version into it," and they were happy to do that. And I think Hemsworth was actually really happy with that. The story sort of evolved a bit differently. But anyway, that I diverged. But yeah, so there's lots of different films out there that you can look at, and we're looking at all sorts of ones. So get in touch and let us know if maybe you want us to look at a particular sci-fi film, or just, send us your feedback if you're listening along. The next episode is number 90, which makes it a classic.
A classic. So last episode, as I explained, was a scheduling mix around. So we said last episode was 89 and next episode 90, but it turns out it's 88 and this is 89. Next one is The Blob.
Yes, The Blob.
1958. So the original.
The original, baby.
Back when there was a lot of monster movies coming out, 50-foot tall women, spiders that were trying to like eat
aliens,
the earth.
Yeah.
And
giant creatures, monsters. I think there's
Draculas.
a Frankenstein in the 50s.
There's a Frankenstein.
Zombies, the birth of the zombie, sort of the Western zombie story.
Oh, geez, yeah, that Night of the Living Dead was a fantastic one.
So there is a whole bunch of monsters
Dawn
and
of
stuff.
Dawn of the Dead?
We're going to look at the real classic sci-fi one, which is The Blob. It spawned numerous sequels, remakes, whatever, and some other sort of versions of this
conceptually, people have
Used
been
this
drawn into this
same
idea of
story.
the visiting space monstrosity
invaders,
and it's there's a different take, I think, on them visiting space monstrosities.
Yeah.
It's
a whole subgenre, isn't it?
Yes,
that we could go down. But
great.
anyway, go check it out. We are looking at the original one if you want to stay up to date with this. And you'll get to hear what we both think about The Blob next time on Space Brains.
Bye-bye.
Bye.